I was a UPS driver for 2 years. The pay was good and I generally enjoyed it, though it had its challenging moments. This was back in 2010, about 2 years after college. I was working the 11 a.m. to 7 p.m. shift on a Thursday during the depths of winter, so it was dark by around 5. I wasn't living in a place like Palm Springs. I was in a small town in North Carolina. While I wouldn't use terms like ghetto or slummy, the area wasn't pleasant at all. I often made deliveries within that same town. The residential layout there was peculiar. Some blocks featured rows of houses and trailers spaced far apart, while others were completely deserted. This resulted in fewer deliveries overall, as the houses were so spread out, making the route take longer than in a typical suburban or urban area. Deliveries were always plotted on the map, so I could take a more strategic route instead of just driving aimlessly. After hours of deliveries covering at least 3 different small towns, I was driving down one of those streets I mentioned, spaced out trailer homes and small houses on one side, forest on the other. It was just past 6 p.m. and my shift was winding down with only a few deliveries left. There was one house on this block where a package needed to be signed for, meaning I couldn't just leave it on the stoop. I pulled up in front of the house and grabbed one of the biggest, heaviest boxes of the day from the back of the truck. There were some kind of small metal pieces rattling around inside. I couldn't even guess what was inside. My job was simply to carry it to the front door of the trailer, which is exactly what I did. This trailer didn't have a doorbell, so I had to knock. However, no lights were on inside, and I didn't see a car out front, so I hoped someone was home. I knocked a few more times. Then I saw the curtains of one window move and footsteps approaching the door. There was then an unnaturally long, suspicious pause before the door finally cracked open. An older woman peeked out looking pale. When I told her she had a package to sign, she opened the door further. She seemed agitated as I asked her to sign the delivery device. She did with a messy signature. Then, she told me she needed help carrying the box into her room, which I figured was likely. The instant I stepped inside the trailer, I was hit by a strong, awful smell. You know how every home has its own distinct scent, good or bad? Well, this place smelled terrible. I don't know what caused it. She led me through a tiny living room area to a narrow hallway where I struggled with the box. She then brought me to a door, opened it, and instructed me to get the box into the closet at the back of the room. I asked her to turn on the light, but she said it didn't work. It was pitch black inside, with only the light from the living room lamp filtering down the hall. I could barely see enough to navigate the box into the room. As I got close to the closet, I saw someone standing in the corner. I knew it was definitely a person by the outline and the movement. There was no logical explanation for this. The person was clearly hiding from me, waiting. I left the box where it was, walked past the woman, and said, "Have a nice day." She started screaming at me to come back and help, even calling me a piece of... I didn't know what this woman and whoever was in that closet planned to do, and I didn't want to find out by sticking around. I finished my shift and went home that night, and that's when I started looking for a different, better job. This happened just west of Tucson on Highway 86 in early October 2022. I remember it vividly because it was right after I dropped off a load of steel supports in Ajo and was deadheading back. The sun had set, the roads were deserted, and the desert was cooling just enough for me to crack the windows halfway. I'm 34, having spent 8 years in the army before transitioning into trucking. That likely explains why I tend to notice details that others often overlook. And that night, the details weren't lining up. I was cruising steadily at around 60 mph with no traffic visible for miles, just me and the sound of my tires on asphalt. Not even a jackrabbit crossed my path in the headlights. Then, out of nowhere, a dark SUV lit up behind me, flashing red and blue lights with high beams on. No siren. I've been pulled over a few times. Random checks, wait stations, the usual DOT encounters. I know how a trooper's vehicle is supposed to look. This one appeared too pristine. No spotlight, no decals, no push bumper, just a plain black SUV. It looked more like a rental than a patrol unit, with the lights mounted inside the windshield instead of on top. Still, I slowed down, signaled right, and found a wide dirt shoulder to pull over. My gut was already tightening. The driver exited the vehicle slowly, keeping a hand near his belt. However, he wasn't wearing a uniform, no trooper hat, and I couldn't see a badge, just a navy windbreaker and jeans. He approached from the passenger side, which was unusual, as most cops come to the driver's side unless traffic is heavy. I leaned over and cracked the window, keeping both hands visible. He said, "Evening, driver. What are you hauling?" His tone was flat. No greeting, no identification. I replied, "Nothing. Just deadheading out of Aho." He glanced up at the sleeper cab. "Do you have cameras in there?" That was the first significant red flag. Cops don't ask about cameras like that. He followed up with, "How heavy was your load? Mind if I take a quick look inside?" I asked, "Do you have a badge number?" He hesitated, caught off guard, then said, "It's just routine. You can step out and we'll go over paperwork." I remained firm. I repeated my question. "Let me see your credentials." He took half a step back, his hands still near his hip. In response, I leaned toward my radio mic and pressed the button loud enough for him to hear. Breaker 9, possible impersonator off 86 westbound. Mile marker 103, requesting confirmation. The instant I said it, he bolted, no words, just a swift turn back to the SUV. He jumped in and sped off into the night, no taillights, and I swear there was no license plate on the back. I waited 5 to 10 minutes, eventually reaching a real trooper through dispatch. I provided the best description I could, and they sent someone out. But by the time anyone arrived, he was long gone. No footage from traffic cams, nothing from nearby gas stations. The desert has a knack for swallowing things whole. I installed a dash cam the following day. From that point on, I don't stop for lights unless they come attached to a badge I can see through the glass. If they attempt to approach from the passenger side again, I won't even lower the window. I keep reflecting on those questions he posed about the cargo and the cameras. He wasn't looking for a citation. He was seeking a way in. If you thought driving down empty highways was creepy, just wait until someone follows you down a Walmart aisle. Smash that like button, hit subscribe so you never miss the next scare, and tell us which story affected you the most. And if late night shopping seems relaxing, you haven't seen what lurks near the toy aisle. Click now to watch 4 terrifying Walmart horror stories, because evil doesn't always wear a mask. Sometimes it just smiles. Stay vigilant, stay safe, and I'll see you in the next nightmare. I'm Kevin, and I've spent a significant portion of the last 15 years working as a truck driver for various companies. At this point, the routine has become quite familiar. I pick up goods and materials, verify their accuracy, and deliver them as instructed. Since we're not compensated hourly, efficiency is vital in this job. For someone like me who has years of experience, I like to think I can outdo the younger drivers who are snatching up these positions. However, this can be a double-edged sword. I often push myself to my limits, functioning on minimal sleep. 4 years back, I worked for a warehouse based in North Dakota. For those unfamiliar, North Dakota is one of the flattest states, which simplifies trucking. However, foregoing a few hours of sleep could mean the difference between staying employed and getting the boot. It was a chilly Tuesday morning in May. Being the start of the week meant more loads needed to be shipped, which equated to more work for me. I wanted to get it all done in one go, so I mapped out my route into Montana, planning not to stop even once to sleep. I hit the road a few hours after lunch, anticipating that I'd reach my destination very early the next morning. I pushed my semi as much as I could, driving a couple of miles over the speed limit. As it grew late, I found myself rubbing the crust from my eyelids while the clock ticked past midnight. I was struggling to keep my eyes open, but only had about an hour left to drive, so I gritted my teeth and pressed on. My friend Tristan, who is also a trucker, introduced me to smelling salts when I first started. If you're unfamiliar, smelling salts are essentially crystals in a small bottle. A quick sniff jolts you awake. You have to be cautious though. Overusing them can be risky, or so Tristan told me, as they can burn your nose a bit. But whenever I needed a quick boost, I grabbed the smelling salts first. And this was one of those moments. I took a deep whiff and tilted my head back as my reflexes kicked in. I felt adrenaline rush through me, hoping it would last for the remainder of the drive. A half hour flew by, but I was really struggling now. I felt myself drifting off, the truck veering onto the shoulder, jolting me back to consciousness. This was becoming hazardous. I needed to pull over. I was utterly alone on the highway, but there were no spots to pull off, only woods on either side. I slowed down, desperately scanning for any place to stop, and at this reduced speed, my headlights pierced the darkness, revealing more than I had noticed before. Then I spotted something strange. A purple dress lying in the middle of the road. What the hell? I thought, rubbing my eyes. Had I imagined it? I blinked 6 times to assure myself I wasn't going crazy. It was real. I approached the dress with my truck, staring at it as I rolled by. In retrospect, this should have raised red flags, but I was simply too fatigued to fully process what was happening. About 200 yards ahead, I spotted a pair of shoes. Now I was genuinely starting to panic. What was happening? I drove past the shoes, praying to God that I could find a place to pull off soon. Growing up, my father David was deeply religious, so I clutched his old cross, hoping for some divine intervention. A little further down the road, I noticed more scattered clothing, some of which appeared to be children's attire. This time, I couldn't just pass it by, so I stopped the truck. Panic rushed in. Something was terribly wrong. My truck stood still as I expected some kind of revelation, but nothing occurred. Following my instincts, I exited the truck to investigate the pile of clothing. I still remember the bite of the chilly morning air cutting through my skin, which did help combat my exhaustion. Cautiously approaching the pile, I confirmed it was indeed kids' clothing. Pieces for both boys and girls were present. As I scanned the woods, I couldn't see much through the darkness. I kept my head on a swivel, convinced this might be some sort of trap. I decided it was best not to delve deeper, so I started heading back to my truck. Just then, I heard a crunching sound to my left. I whipped around, trying to spot what might be there, standing in silence, waiting for another sound. After about 30 seconds, a crunch echoed from the opposite side of the road. My survival instincts kicked in, and I sprinted back to my truck. As I jumped into the driver's seat and was about to slam the door, I heard a child's scream pierce the silence. I froze, my heart racing. I was caught in a dilemma. I wasn't about to fight random people in a dark forest, but I couldn't just walk away from children in distress either. Before I could decide, another identical cry rang out. Without thinking, I fired up the truck and aimed it towards the area in the woods where I had heard the noise. My headlights illuminated about 30 yards into the woods, revealing 3 or 4 figures, one of whom was hoisting a large speaker. They ducked behind a few trees as my headlights swung over them, but I had illuminated them just enough to discern their actions. They hid from the light, but I was sure they were trying to lure me into the woods using a fabricated child's scream. I was in shock, staring at the trees they had hidden behind. Reaching for my phone to call the police, just as I was about to dial, I heard a thud against the body of the truck. Something had been thrown from the opposite direction. That was my cue to leave. I shifted my focus back to the road and slammed the gas. I spotted a figure on the other side of the road, yelling something I couldn't make out before they hurled something at my truck, shattering the passenger side window. I drove the final hour in silence, too shaken to process what had just transpired. There was no way I was pulling over to sleep in those woods. After completing my delivery, I collapsed in exhaustion, sleeping for a full 10 hours. When I awoke, the first thing I did was contact the police, who assured me they would investigate the woods and provide any updates. Reflecting on the ordeal, I realized how foolish I had been to exit my truck. I should have minded my own business, but the thought of kids being kidnapped or worse was something I couldn't ignore. To this day, I remain puzzled by their intentions. I have no idea why they didn't just rush me when they had the chance, or what they planned for me if I went running into the woods after the screaming kids. Throughout my years as a trucker, nothing has ever come close to matching the strangeness or sheer terror of this experience. I've been in the trucking industry longer than some dispatchers have lived, over 23 years. Scares don't easily find me. I've slept through tornado warnings, maneuvered through ice storms loaded down, and even experienced an attempted hijacking at a rest area. I've seen my fair share of oddities on the road, but nothing compares to what I encountered off Highway 56. This incident took place about a year ago while I was on a solo run hauling feed corn out of Wichita Falls, heading west towards Gallup, a route I've handled countless times. It was a smooth haul, mostly taking back roads, with not many towns in between, which suited me fine. I enjoy solitude. It allows me the space to think. That night felt unnervingly normal, too normal perhaps. No strange sensations or red flags. After passing through a small stop called Medford, I planned to pull over in about an hour. I was around 5 hours into the journey when I noticed a sign for a rest area. The green paint was faded, and it appeared as if someone had blasted it with a shotgun. Letters missing. But I managed to read rest stop, accompanied by an arrow pointing off the highway. Here's the peculiar part. I'd never seen that sign before, and I know that route inside and out. Not just memorized, but noted on GPS and old logs. But I was tired. Not exhaustion from dozing off, but a heavy-eyed weariness that told me I needed to park and sleep. I decided to take the exit. The rest area was more like a mere slab of cracked pavement with dead mosquitoes and a broken fence, completely devoid of lights and vehicles, just an empty stretch of dirt and concrete. Something felt off, and I couldn't quite pinpoint it. It was an odd sensation, almost like a low pressure drop in my chest, as though I'd stumbled into a room with the eerie feeling of being discussed behind my back. Despite my initial hesitation, I rationalized that I was merely overthinking things, and it was probably just an old stop I hadn't noticed before. Perhaps it was decommissioned or temporary. I figured I'd get some sleep, then hit the road after a few hours to reach Gallup before mid-morning. So I parked, killed the engine, and climbed into the sleeper. I cracked the window a smidge for air out of habit and locked both doors before laying there, only to find myself out within minutes. That sleep didn't hold long. I awoke about an hour later to an unsettling, absolute silence. No wind, no insects buzzing, no engine ticking, nothing. This silence felt wrong, artificial, as if the entire world had been muted. Then I caught wind of a foul odor, thick and rotten like meat left in a hot car for days. It made me gag and I sat up quickly, knocking my head against the ceiling. My heart raced as I reached for my flashlight, turning it on and leaning forward to peer out the windshield. That's when I saw someone, standing in the middle of the road, not far from my truck, just standing there silently. My first instinct was to assume there was someone stranded or broken down. I turned the key in the ignition, but the engine wouldn't start. My stomach dropped. I tried again. It failed to turn over. My rig had never let me down before. I was meticulous about pre-checks, and the battery was brand new, installed just 6 days prior. I tried once more, this time slower. Nothing. Turning the flashlight back toward the road, the figure remained in the same spot, motionless. It was tall, too tall. Its arms dangled too low, even beyond the knees, and the position it held was unnatural. While upright, its neck was bent sideways as if dislocated. Its head twitched slightly like it was adjusting to the light, yet it remained unmoving. I averted my gaze, shutting off the flashlight, sitting still for the next 10 to 15 minutes, listening and breathing shallowly, waiting for it to take action. When I finally glanced again, it had disappeared. I flicked the flashlight back on, sweeping the light across the lot. Nothing. I almost convinced myself to breathe again when, suddenly, there was a sharp tap against the passenger side window. I didn't turn immediately. I stood frozen, a kind of primal fear that rendered my muscles immobile. Eventually I turned, an upside-down face pressed against the glass. It had climbed onto the roof. Its mouth was wide open, so wide it seemed unnaturally unhinged, revealing nothing inside except a dark, wet cavity. Its skin stretched taut across its skull, slick with some unknown substance, maybe oil or blood. I couldn't discern. Its eyes were the most disturbing feature, pure white, seeming carved from chalk, bulging without eyelids or movement, mere orbs staring right through me. I was unable to scream or breathe, completely paralyzed, my heart racing, pounding against my ribs like it wanted out. Slowly, I backed away toward the sleeper, keeping my eyes locked on it. Without warning, it vanished from my sight. No sound, no thump on the hood, just gone. I spent the rest of the night alert, flashlight aimed at the windshield and a wrench in my lap, sweating profusely. At some point, I must have passed out. When I awoke to sunlight, everything appeared normal, too normal. Just the stretch of desert highway, emptiness, and distant birds, as if nothing had happened at all. I started the truck on the first attempt, and the engine purred like a content feline. I didn't stop to eat, check the tires, or even glance at the mirrors. I drove straight to Gallup. That night, I parked at a bustling truck stop surrounded by light and people, feeling safe. But after settling into the sleeper and pulling the curtain shut, I caught a glimpse of handprints on the passenger side window, 2 elongated, wet smudges as if something had tried to get inside. I scrubbed them off, not saying a word to anyone. A couple of weeks later, while filling up in El Paso, another driver struck up a conversation with me at the pumps. I casually mentioned Highway 56, recounting my experience at that strange old rest stop near Medford. The color drained from his face, and without a word, he simply stated, "You pulled off there." I nodded. He didn't inquire about my experience, merely remarked, "You saw it," before walking away without finishing his coffee or saying goodbye. I now deliberately avoid that road whenever possible, rerouting through Amarillo, adding about 2 hours to my journey depending on the traffic. I don't mind. Stopping at unfamiliar rest areas is out of the question now. I don't crack my windows, Don't ignore my instincts. And my sleep isn't as easy as it used to be. Whatever that thing was, it knew who I was. It climbed onto that roof with intent and wanted in, yet it didn't succeed. I'm 45 and have been driving trucks since I was 23. Not much of a conversationalist, but if you've got a moment, I'd like to share an encounter from a few years ago that still puzzles me. It happened in early spring, and I remember that well because the bugs hadn't begun to stage themselves on my windshield just yet. I was on a solo journey from Kansas City to a small facility near Lafayette. It was a regular shipment of steel coils, heavy cargo but nothing unusual. I had traversed this route before. The haul was smooth, with decent timing and no mishaps. It was late, probably close to midnight, when a deep weariness settled in, the kind creeping up behind your eyes, making you feel heavy. I didn't want to push through that tiredness. Experience teaches you not to test those limits. So, I checked my GPS for a place to pull over and discovered an old way station a few miles ahead. The GPS indicated it had been closed for years, yet the lot was still there. An expansive, quiet space. I drove in, parking toward the back near the tree line. There were no other trucks, no lights except my own. I kept the engine running for warmth and crawled into the sleeper for some rest. I couldn't have been out for more than 10 minutes when I felt it. A bump. This wasn't the sort of jolt from the trailer settling or a gust of wind. It felt more as if someone had shoved the back end of the trailer gently with their shoulder. It was soft but noticeable enough to rouse me without causing immediate alarm. I sat up, held my breath and waited. That's when I heard it. A slow metallic dragging sound, unsettling and inappropriate. It was moving along the passenger side of the trailer, long and deliberate, like someone was using a crowbar along its side. I grabbed my flashlight from the dash, cracked the door open and peered outside. Visibility was poor. I could only see the lot and the shapes of the trees. I exited the bunk, my boots hitting the gravel, and walked to the other side of the rig. The trailer appeared undamaged. No dents, no scratches. But I spotted footprints, bare, enormous, and far too large to be normal. I wear a size 11, and these tracks made mine look child-sized. They were deep, too, as if whoever had made them carried significant weight. The prints originated from the tree line, approached the trailer, and then turned back towards the woods. There were no tire tracks, no indication of another vehicle, just these vast impressions in the gravel. I traced the footprints a few steps forward, shining my flashlight between the trees. Part of me speculated it could have been some prankster from the backwoods trying to scare off truckers. But what I encountered didn't fit that narrative. About 20 yards in, just beyond my flashlight's beam, stood a figure, tall, perfectly still. No shirt, just shredded jeans drenched from the knees down, regardless of whether it was mud or something else. I wasn't keen to investigate. The individual's skin appeared different, pale, somewhat greyish, as if it had been years since they saw sunlight. Standing there with a head tilted, eyes wide, locked onto me as though he knew my next move. And then he smiled. No, it wasn't a smile. It was more of a grin, a too wide expression, as if his face was stretched in a way that didn't seem right. There were no teeth, just lips stretching wide against the eerie silence of the moment. That's what stuck out the most, the oppressive quiet. No bugs, no wind, nothing. Just that figure staring at me from within the trees. I didn't shout or make threats. Instead, I turned and calmly walked back to the cab. I climbed in, locked the doors, started the engine, and sped off. I didn't even glance at my mirrors, focusing only on the road, as if my survival depended on it because honestly, it truly felt that way. I made it perhaps 10 miles down the road before I stole a quick look in the rearview mirror. That's when I spotted them. The same footprints now atop the trailer. I slammed on the brakes, nearly jackknifing the rig. I pulled into a well-lit rest area, ensuring visibility with an orange buzzing street lamp that only made everything feel worse. I climbed out, flashlight in one hand and tire thumper in the other. My hands shook, not uncontrollably, just enough to make climbing the ladder to the trailer roof a challenge. But when I reached the top, nobody was there, just dust and a cold breeze. But etched into the dust near the edge were letters reading one word: remember. The script was clean and deliberate, as if someone had taken their time crafting it. I descended without looking back, slipped into the cab, and drove straight through to Lafayette. No stops, no brakes, no side roads. After the drop-off, I took 2 weeks off, telling dispatch I had the flu. I struggled to sleep for more than a couple of hours during that period, waking each time convinced something was lurking outside my window. It never was, but I began avoiding isolated parking spots. Truck stops filled with light and other drivers became my new norm. Even if it meant spending extra money, I ensured I never saw that thing again. Yet occasionally, when I find myself parked overnight and the world turns still, I sense it again. That soft bump, just enough to make me wonder if it was real. I became a truck driver when I was 25 and have accumulated many night drives, naturally experiencing my fair share of odd occurrences. I've done deliveries for various types of companies. Often, I had to drive across state lines to deliver shipments to receiving companies or stores. One day, I had to drive literally from one side of California to the other, delivering a trailer full of wooden furniture items. Much of the drive was on open desert roads. It was going to take many hours and I had a late start, so I knew most of my drive would be in the dark. Given the nature of those desert roads at night, how straight they are and the lack of traffic, it meant I could drive the truck a bit faster than usual. This meant that when I saw the flashing rear lights of a car on the horizon, I had to brake a little harder to stop. When I finally pulled up behind the car, it was an old Chevy Impala parked on the side of the desert road with its hazard lights on. I got out of my truck, being the helpful Samaritan I supposed, to see if they needed assistance. I walked over and tapped on the window but got no response. I leaned down to look through the tinted glass. No one seemed to be sitting inside. I checked all 3 other seats and confirmed there wasn't anyone in the car. I looked out into the dark desert where the road ran, though I couldn't see further than maybe 20 yards ahead. For some reason, I felt particularly helpful that night, so I returned to my truck, retrieved a heavy-duty tactical flashlight from the toolbox under the passenger seat. It was so bright it hurt to look directly at it. As soon as I turned it on, it revealed what appeared to be an abandoned gas station beside the road. I apparently hadn't noticed it before. I guess I didn't realize because the entire fill-up or parking area was basically dirt. There was no concrete. There were also only 2 gas pumps. Behind them was a small building, probably an old quick-stop store at one point. It seemed most logical that whoever was with the car would be in that building. I went to the front door, which was permanently jammed open. The flashlight illuminated a decent portion of the room inside. It looked like a large convenience store you'd find at many gas stations, or at least it once was. It's no wonder it didn't survive on a road like this, though. I called out to let anyone know I was there and meant to help. There was the slightest echo in the room, which gave me chills for some reason. Then, I heard something, probably a shoe scrape against the floor, on the opposite side of the room, behind some shelves that were likely once stocked with snacks and drinks. I called out again, offering help if needed. Then I heard a deep, heavy whisper saying, I understood instantly what was said, but I didn't understand why whoever said it would say that. I was also hearing heavy breathing in one corner of the room, which was enough to make me get out of there quickly. On my way back to my truck, this is what I heard, and there was a good 5 seconds of confusion. I didn't know if what I was hearing was real or not, if that makes sense. I ran to my truck and called 911, honestly too scared to go back into that building. They asked for an exact location, which I couldn't provide. All I could say was that I was by an abandoned gas station on some road in the desert. They asked me to stay on the line so I could give a better description of my location. But suddenly, the car I'd seen turned its lights on and started speeding down the desert road. I hadn't even noticed anyone get into the car. It was so dark, and I was so focused on the phone call. I ran back into the building to see if anyone was still inside, of course keeping 911 on the line. I went to the back section where I'd heard the voice and breathing. I was horrified to see a fresh pool of blood on the floor. I could only imagine what had happened. I explained over the phone that I believed I'd just stumbled onto a crime scene. Eventually, they managed to send several state troopers to the location. They asked for any information I could give: license plate number, description of the suspect, what I thought happened. All I said was it was a black Chevy Impala, early 2000s model. I heard a man tell me to get out before hearing a woman screaming as they left the building. There was no body left behind, but I had some ideas about what might have occurred. I'm sure the state police took blood samples and the like, but I wasn't able to offer much more help. Shamefully, I didn't have a dash cam at that point to get the license plate number. But literally the next week, I installed a dash cam in my assigned truck. This was just one of those once-in-a-lifetime experiences that will always haunt me. I'm Ray, and I've been in trucking for 21 years. That's a significant amount of miles driven, countless late-night cups of coffee, and more gas station sandwiches than I prefer to recall. Over the years, most of the strange happenings fade into background noise. The highway can play tricks on your vision. Your brain tends to zone out during stretches, and occasionally, yes, you see things. But this instance, this was different. It wasn't an illusion or a blur in my rearview mirror. It was the only time in my career that something rattled me enough to completely change my approach to driving. After this event, I completely ceased night runs. It began like any other haul, transporting a trailer filled with electrical transformers out of Idaho Falls, bound for Cheyenne, straightforward enough. I had run that route so many times, I no longer needed GPS assistance. Passing through Pinedale, Rollins, and onward to Cheyenne was routine for me. I recall stopping at a battered gas station just before crossing into Wyoming. It had one of those outdated displays that clickily roll over numbers like it's still 1989. When I swiped my card, nothing happened. I tried again. The pump reset itself. A third attempt yielded no success. It was unusual, but not unheard of. I strolled inside to pay, and the cashier, a lanky kid with a faded neck tattoo, looked at me and said, deadpan, "Yeah, it does that when the ghosts mess with it." I smirked and replied with something like, "Good joke," handing him cash. He shrugged like he wasn't kidding, but I didn't push the matter further, returning to my cab and continuing on my way. That stretch heading southeast into Wyoming is quiet by nature, not eerie, just typical for that region. Once I crossed the state line, something about it felt off. I can't articulate it logically, and that frustrates me. The road was fine, the truck was fine. I felt as if I were being watched, like something invisible was trailing behind me just out of sight. I passed a few darkened rest stops. No illumination, no rigs in sight, just me and the highway. Then I spotted two headlights just off the road, set back behind a line of skinny pines. The lights were too high and widely spaced to belong to a car. Perhaps another truck that pulled over for the night. That's what I told myself. Yet they were angled the wrong way, not facing towards the road or positioned for a return. These lights pointed directly across the highway, fixated on my path as if they were watching me. As I approached, a creeping dread settled in my gut. I slowed down, leaning forward. The uncomfortable feeling returned. Just as I passed that spot, the lights vanished. No dimming, no flickering, just disappearance. No cab, no taillights, no sound, nothing behind the trees. I checked my mirrors, confirming nothing was there, just empty snow and silent trees. I told myself it was some roadside equipment I hadn't recognized, or perhaps an odd angle of a truck I just missed. 10 minutes later, I saw the lights once more. Same height, same distance from the road, with an identical angle. It felt like someone had copy-pasted those headlights 10 miles down the highway. By this point, I was genuinely spooked. I slowed almost to a complete stop, cracked the window to hear better. Cold air rushed in, but I pushed through. Still, I was met with nothing. No movement, wind, or traffic. My hand trembled as I grabbed my flashlight and turned it toward the trees. I hated feeling this way. I had driven through blizzards and even jackknifed my rig once back in 2011. But this was different. Then, just as abruptly as it appeared, the lights blinked out once more. I sat there, heart pounding, unsure for a brief moment before convincing myself I was simply tired. That was my best excuse. I pressed on until I noticed a turnout. It was a gravel patch, possibly a defunct way station or snowplow staging area. No lights or signage, merely a flat, wide space to park. I slipped in, backing the trailer against a snowbank, then switched everything off. Silence enveloped me. Loaded silence. Not that calming kind. Climbing into my sleeper, still wearing my boots, I lay down grabbing my flashlight, questioning whether it was simply headlights after all. Around midnight, I heard footsteps, clear as day, crunching in the snow. One step, pause, another one followed. I held my breath. There's a particular sound made when someone walks on snow when it's cold, the brittle kind. This was just that. Then silence, followed by more steps, closer, without a sense of urgency, merely a slow, deliberate pace, as if someone was circling the truck. I didn't move. Then I heard a dragging sound, metal scraping against metal starting at the rear of the trailer, making its way toward the cab. I reached for the flashlight, powered it on but didn't move. Waited. The scraping ceased. I lunged forward into the driver's seat and flipped on the high beams. The lot remained empty, completely still, but I saw them. Footprints. Bare. No treads. long, deep impressions circling the truck. They came all the way around but stopped right beneath my door. I felt frozen, not out of uncertainty about what to do, but because I feared that opening the door might bring whatever it was inside. I didn't check the trailer, nor did I inspect the lot further. I simply started the truck, locked the doors, and drove off hard. I didn't look in the rearview mirror until I was 20 miles down the road, straight into Cheyenne without stopping for anything. I didn't eat, didn't even allow myself to blink. The sun rose around Rollins, but it didn't feel like relief. Just light, that's all. At the first way station outside of town, I pulled in, hands still trembling, relaying to the officer on duty that I thought someone had tried to break into my truck. When he asked where, I replied, "Mile marker 232. He frowned, saying that section doesn't even have a 232. It jumps from 231 to 233, a change made since the last reroute. I explained about the footprints, the lights, the scraping sound. He paused before taking a look at my logbook, returning it promptly. Drive during the day, he advised, wearing a serious expression, to which I didn't reply. When I checked my GPS log later, everything was recorded except for a 5-minute interval that seemed to have vanished. No transmission, no data. It was as if the truck stopped existing briefly. Since that night, I've avoided that stretch after dark, regardless of offers or good rates. I don't take them anymore. I no longer drive from dusk to dawn. I've spent most of my adult life driving long-haul trucks. It's not glamorous by any means, but it's reliable, and I cherish the solitude. There's something comforting about the repetitive rhythm of it all. Just me, my rig, and the open road. Generally speaking, it's predictable. Drive, rest, deliver, and repeat. However, now and then, something slips through the cracks of the ordinary. This tale, this occurrence, defies categorization in my experience. It happened 3 winters ago in the midst of a cross-country haul. I was transporting refrigerated goods, predominantly frozen poultry, somewhere out west past Nebraska. I had traversed that stretch of I-80 more times than I could count, and honestly, it's not one of the more thrilling routes. It mostly consists of flat land, small towns, and long barren stretches of road. You'd think I'd have it memorized by this point. That night, however, I was running behind, stuck in Ohio due to warehouse issues. So I found myself driving later than I would usually allow. I passed through a town called Bellwood around 11:15 p.m., planning to drive for perhaps another hour before pulling over. I don't mess around with drowsy driving, but I figured I had some gas left in the tank. Then the fatigue hit hard, different from the usual road weariness. This was heavy, as though a switch had flipped in my body. My eyelids felt like they were made of bricks. My arms felt leaden, and I struggled to keep the truck steady in its lane. Then, as if it were waiting for me, a rest area sign appeared. Simple blue highway signage stating 2 miles. No frills, just the words. Without a second thought, I activated my turn signal, exited, and pulled into the lot. The first thing that struck me was how desolate the site appeared. No semis, no cars, just me. The pavement was cracked, suggesting a lack of maintenance for years. The streetlight flickered in and out, casting bizarre, dancing shadows. The building at the center resembled a bunker. Grey concrete walls, boarded up windows, and a couple of broken vending machines visible through grimy glass near the entrance. It struck me as not just empty, but abandoned. But at that moment, I was too exhausted to care. I pulled into a space near the back, turned off the engine, climbed into the sleeper, and stretched out. I expected to wake in maybe 20 or 30 minutes, but instead, I jolted awake feeling a cold that shouldn't have been possible, a chilling sensation that seemed to seep into my bones. The type of cold that contradicts the amount of time that has passed. It was so frigid I could see my breath. Confused, I sat up quickly, feeling around for my phone. It was dead. I swore I had left it charging. Pulling the curtain back, I peered out my windshield. There were figures standing in front of the truck. Dozens of them, utterly still, facing my cab. No movement, no sound. They looked like men, women, a pair of children. At least that's how their shapes appeared. Their faces were engulfed in shadows. Or perhaps I couldn't focus on them. No lights, no phones, just the dark outlines standing resolutely. I didn't move. I held my breath, convinced this was a dream, a residual image from something I had witnessed before falling asleep. Then, one of them stepped forward, a tall man perhaps, wearing something long like a coat or cloak. He strolled casually toward my door, his movements unhurried. That's when sheer panic washed over me. I lunged forward, locking the doors, and leapt into the driver's seat. I flipped on the headlights, and they vanished. Not walking away, not fleeing, just gone. No trace of anyone left. The lot was empty. Gripping the steering wheel, my heart raced so fiercely I thought it would break something within me. I didn't question it. I didn't try to rationalize. I only wanted to start the engine and escape. The rig wouldn't fire up. The battery was completely drained. It had been perfectly fine before I parked. Alone with no phone, no functioning engine, and no warmth, I threw on my coat, grabbed my flashlight, and exited the truck. As soon as my feet hit the ground, the cold hit me like a wall. I went to check beneath the hood, relying more on instinct than hope. That's when I noticed the footprints. They were everywhere, surrounding the truck and circling it, deep impressions in the frozen slush. There were no tire tracks from any other vehicle, no prints leading in or out, just those marks as if people had materialized from the pavement, standing around in wait. I backed away slowly, climbed back inside the cab, locked the doors again, and remained in place. I didn't sleep. I didn't even blink. I kept the flashlight on, pointing at the windshield, watching and waiting. Hours seemed to pass, but the sky never lightened. The lot remained dark. There was no sunlight, no help, just me and the frozen rig. I must have blacked out again. I can't explain it any other way. When I opened my eyes, everything had changed. The cab was warm, the engine was running, and my phone had returned to life, charging as if nothing had occurred. I checked the time. It was almost 7 a.m. Glancing outside, I found no footprints, no damage. The snow surrounding the truck appeared fresh and untouched. I got out and made my way around the perimeter. Nothing. No indication that anyone had ever been there. Even the building looked different now, cleaner and brighter. However, as I approached it, something within me warned me not to engage. I climbed back into the truck and drove away. Later, I checked every detail I could find. My GPS didn't show any record of a stop at a rest area in that location. I contacted a friend who once managed dispatch in that region and inquired about the exit. He informed me it had been permanently closed years ago and had been demolished during infrastructure upgrades. There shouldn't have been a rest stop there. When I reviewed the dashcam footage from that night, the segment during my stop was just static. A 4-hour stretch of pure visual noise. I've taken that route on I-80 dozens of times since, day and night, but I've never seen that sign again. I never found that exit. It felt as if it had only existed that one time, waiting for my fatigue to allow me to see it. Now, I avoid stopping between mile markers 238 and 240, no matter how tired I am or how long I've been driving. I keep going until I pass it. I'm a mechanic by trade, but in 2009, I was a full-time truck driver. It wasn't the life I dreamed of living, but it paid far better than fixing up busted tailpipes and worn transmissions. I used to take longer hauls across the southern states, primarily Texas to Arkansas, and I knew the routes by heart. Some nights, it felt as though the road recognized me too. That October, I picked up a solo run from Amarillo to Little Rock, a trip I remember vividly because my birthday was approaching that weekend, and I promised my sister I'd be home for it. Nothing extravagant, just dinner and her awfully lopsided carrot cake. Still, I was looking forward to it. Typically, I avoided overnight trips alone, but my co-driver Nate had quit the week prior, citing a need for a break. His exact words were, "I can't do nights anymore." He never elaborated, but I could tell something had unsettled him. During our last haul, he kept glancing in the side mirrors, like he expected someone to be tailing us. I asked once, but he merely replied, "You'll see," chuckling in a tight way that didn't truly seem funny. I dropped the subject. Everyone has their ghosts. The night started off ordinarily enough as I hit the road from Amarillo in the late afternoon. Clear skies, light traffic. I stopped at a L&L for coffee and a hot dog that tasted uncomfortably like plastic. I took my time, planning to cross the Arkansas border before midnight. An hour into Oklahoma, somewhere past Eric was when I first spotted him. It was approximately 8:45 p.m. I looked at the dash, noticing it flickering, likely a loose connection that I hadn't had the chance to fix. My headlights swept across the shoulder, and there he was, standing completely motionless, facing straight ahead, as if he had been placed there. He wasn't attempting to flag me down or walking. He was just standing there utterly still, dressed in a long brown coat that looked heavy, similar to older wool coats seen in detective movies, and soaking wet at the hem. He didn't blink or move an inch, Oddly, my lights didn't catch his face. That part wasn't obscured. It seemed the shadows clung to it, refusing to reveal anything. I slowed down just a bit. Not much, only responding to an instinct telling me to be wary. Everything about his posture made my skin crawl. I've encountered countless hitchhikers and odd characters over the years. But this guy gave me the sense that he wasn't after help. He was just waiting. I radioed it in, a possible pedestrian at mile marker 197, with no vehicle in sight. Routine procedure. As the dispatcher noted, she'd alert State Patrol. I continued driving, reminding myself he might just be a drifter, perhaps drunk or lost. 10 minutes later, I spotted him again. Same coat, identical stance. Only this time he was on the opposite side of the highway. I'm well aware of how lighting can create illusions on the road after an extended drive, especially on straight stretches like this. There are no exits, no curves, and no logical way to cross without me seeing it. Even if he had sprinted across the divider, there's no way he could have moved so quickly ahead of me. So, I turned off the radio. The static screeching between songs was annoying and oddly forbidding. The ensuing silence felt somewhat safer, as if by staying quiet, I could evade whatever was taking place. Approximately 40 minutes later, I pulled into a familiar rest stop containing 2 vending machines, a restroom, and an unnecessary payphone. One other truck was parked in the lot, situated far in the back. Quiet and dark. Presumably the driver was already passed out in their sleeper. I parked under a lone flickering lamp and made my way to the restroom, not particularly fatigued, though I needed to splash some water on my face to shake off the sleepiness. Once inside, the lights flickered, buzzing before dimming enough to make me halt. I dismissed it as nothing, just outdated wiring. I've seen worse. Approaching the sink, I leaned down to look in the mirror. I looked unwell, pale skin, eyes bloodshot with red veins. Not exhausted, yet drained, as if I had been running on empty all day without noticing. I twisted the faucet, allowing cold water to run, and as I leaned down to splash some on my face, the lights went completely out. All at once, not even a flicker. Simply blackness. I froze, water still clinging to my fingers, unable to even see my reflection. Then I heard it. Heavy bootsteps, slow and steady, approaching down the hallway behind me. Instinctively, I thought it was another driver, perhaps the person from the other truck. I called out, "Occupied!" No response, just steady steps closing in, unwavering and deliberate. Then they stopped right outside the door. For reasons I can't explain, I remained still and didn't turn around. I felt tingling in my fingers, and the ringing silence weighed heavy on my ears. I stared into the void where the mirror had been, too afraid to breathe. A few seconds later, the lights flickered back on, restoring their buzzing hum as if nothing had ever happened. The hallway empty. I didn't linger to question it. I exited quickly, keys already in hand, bypassing the vending machines and bathroom check. Once at my cab, I stopped dead in my tracks. Something was on the passenger seat, damp and brown, just like that coat. I always keep that seat vacated as a personal habit. It keeps the cab tidy, reduces clutter, and promotes better sleep when everything is in its place. So why was that coat sitting there? Approaching closer, I noted it smelled of mold and stale smoke. The kind of musty dampness you find in an old basement that's been neglected. Oddly, the seat felt warm, like someone had recently occupied it. I slammed the door, enough force to rock the rig, then climbed in, started the engine, and didn't stop until crossing into Arkansas. Upon seeing the glowing Waffle House sign by the interstate, I pulled off. Checking the seat again, it was empty. No coat, no odor. The fabric felt cold to the touch. I didn't dare go inside. I parked beneath the lights, locked the doors, and left the engine running, remaining alert until the sky began to brighten. I didn't close my eyes once. That was the last time I took that route. Upon returning, I informed dispatch that I would not be running through Oklahoma anymore. No explanation necessary. I suspected Nate had sensed something. He just didn't know how to articulate it. Since then, I've traveled many more miles and encountered my share of strange occurrences. But that night stays with me. Even now, when I pull into a rest stop, thoughts of those footsteps, the coat, the suffocating silence resurface. A quick glance at the passenger seat still sends shivers down my spine.